In a world filled with information, where do you turn to get straight talk about retirement, investments, and your money? Lock it in to the longest running financial talk show in Arkansas, and let us help you build the bridge between information and application. Real financial change begins right here, and it starts with you.
It's showtime! Woo!
On today's show, the perils of doing retirement by yourself. It can be like a DIY project that could go terribly wrong, and we all know those stories. The value of hiring a professional, coming up.
This is the Get Ready for the Future show.
And good morning, and welcome into another edition of the Get Ready for the Future show. My name is Scott Inman. John Shrewsbury and Chad Roller in with us today as we settle in for another show on this beautiful spring morning in Arkansas. Nothing says mid-spring like a frost advisory like we had this morning, but we are going to warm back up. We know we are.
What the heck is all this? I don't get it. It's almost May and it's cold outside.
I know it. I saw the frost. Did you see the frost?
Yep. Yeah. Saw the flower beds with all the sheets covering all the plants up. So
see, I forgot to do that. So I'm probably losing some azaleas today.
Well, the problem was a wind was blowing last night when we would have done it, and so it's like, forget it.
Believe me, I know that. I went to a girls' high school soccer game, so I know all about the wind last night. Yeah, so we know it's going to warm back up, obviously, and we know that people are going to get back out. The 90s will be here before you know it. We're going to talk a little bit today about DIY retirement. You know, that kind of is the term that's been thrown around, I guess. It has gotten a little popular with people who do things on their own when it comes to investing, and even sometimes on through retirement. And when you hear DIY, it stands for do-it-yourself. You think of home projects or home building. You're looking at three guys around the table today who have all participated in that process, the home building process. And I think overall, I would say that mine was a very pleasurable experience. I'm happy with my home, but my gosh, if you really start thinking about how this thing went, my experience with building my own home, and I actually was the general contractor myself on the job. I talked to, it's a long story, but I was in TV then, and I talked to a guy who did weather, was a meteorologist in town on a different station, and he was contracting his own home, and I ran into him, and he said, "Oh yeah, you can do it. Here's what you do," and he kind of helped me line up some things. And I knew a lot of subcontractors. I knew a really good friend with a guy who did the electrical work in my home, and he kind of just spoon-fed me the guys to call, right?
Right.
So I could manage that. So I thought, I can manage the whole job, right? Well, the house is still standing. That's the good news.
That's
the good news, but certainly I made mistakes because I didn't know. I mean, I'd never built a house before. I didn't know what I was doing.
And you had to play the Channel 7 card a couple of times,
yes,
right?
I did threaten 7 on your side.
Many
times.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
And that got it done in a timely manner. I just don't know how well it was done.
Hey, I have lived this DIY thing all my life, my entire life. My dad was a DIYer. Now, at my house, it was not DIY, do it yourself. It was demolish it yourself. That was what happened almost every time that we did something. There's a long story about a car and some spark plugs and things of that nature that I won't go into, but it did involve getting a tow truck. So we'll leave it at that. But, when I think about DIY, Scott, I think about that classic line from the Clint Eastwood movie, "A man's got to know his limitations."
Yeah, right.
And I know mine because I watched my father try to do all this stuff, and bless his heart, he's too broke to hire anybody to do it, so he's going to do it himself, and it got us all in trouble. And Chad has been down this road a time or two.
Multiple times.
I have, especially living on a farm. You work off of a reduced budget, and sometimes you just kind of put things together, try to make them work, and the frustrations of do it yourself, but sometimes there's some joy comes into those few times that you get it right. As a guy, you're like, okay, yeah, I did it myself.
Right.
So you feel good about it. But there are limited things in this world that I do now that are definitely DIY. I definitely don't change my own oil and do some of those things nowadays that back in the day I thought I needed to.
Well, Scott, I think that when it comes to the retirement issue, I think what happens is that people have access to information way more than they used to.
Yes.
And you can pull up retirement online on the internet and think, oh, well, I've got everything I need because there's all this information right here. But then you start digging into it and you'll find this article that says this and this article that says something completely different. And so it is something that we believe is best left to the professionals, the folks that do this on a day-to-day basis, a week-to-week basis. It is incredibly critical because there are no do-overs in retirement.
Right.
You know, you can always back up on the house and tear that down and fix it again or do it again.
If you have money.
If you have money. But retirement's not one of those things.
Right. And I think even, I talked about myself in my project where I actually was the general contractor. I still relied heavily on professionals. I was making phone calls. I was not hammering nails, right? I mean, the guys that knew what they were doing when it came to drywall, they were the experts on the drywall. The guys that framed my house, they were the experts on framing the house. The concrete guys, I mean, you brought multiple subcontractors into the overall construction of your home because they each had specialist roles, and they knew way more than me. So I think the same is true when it comes to, I think it's a great point that you bring up. You can do a Google search about how to invest, the latest stock tips, all of these things, but how do you really apply them in your overall plan? And I understand it. I understand it from the standpoint of most of the people we're talking about right now, if you've been investing very long, you've been in a bull market for much of that ride, right? I mean, I know that we corrected last year and started a new one, but from 2009 until last year, we were on an upward trend, and it was almost like you could do no wrong. Throw some money at something, and it went up.
Yeah, you can't fail, and that's one of the kind of the lures of this is, oh, well, this is easy.
Right.
It is until it isn't.
Yeah.
And when you look at, if you pull up an article, let's say on retirement, what you're going to find is that article says something like this. I actually got this written out here. The precise weighting of stocks and bonds in your portfolio should be derived based on your age, investment horizon, income needs, and risk tolerance. Yeah, try that and do that one yourself. That's a little bit complex. And so retirement is one of those things that you don't want to get it wrong, because if you get it wrong and you're down the road before you realize that you've gotten it wrong, then, Chad, it's really too late.
Well, and you got to also think about how many tools that you need to build a house. I mean, you think about the size of a shop that you'd need just to store all the different types of tools and the specialties for each plumber, electrician, everything. And it's the same with us as advisors. There is so many tools that we have, in our tool chest that we call it, that, not all the time. We're not using them every day, right?
Right.
But we have access to them, but we know when the right time is to use that specific tool. And that's really where, the do-it-yourself retirement, how do you know you're using the right tool?
Scott, you did not really DIY your house.
Right.
You really were the kind of the creator of your house, and you did pull some things together. You were more involved in it than I was in mine. I sat down with a contractor and I said, I want it to look like this, and I want it to be at this location in this way, and I want it to be done by this time.
Yep.
And he went, great. We're all on board, and then I would go by occasionally and look and see what was going on. I'd stay out of the way, and everything went great. You were a little bit more involved in that, but you were still kind of the conductor of the orchestra. You weren't trying to run around and play all the instruments and be every role that you needed to have in that project. And I think that's why you're still living in that house as opposed to maybe a tent, because if you were all doing it just yourself, then I'm not real sure I want to come over and visit.
We were both still clients. I was just a little more hands-on than you were. Right?
Yes,
I wanted to know how it all worked a little bit more than you had handed it off a little bit more. Well, I think about those articles like you just quoted. First of all, it makes very little sense to apply that to an individual, because those articles are written to the mass audience, right? I mean, that to me is the jumping off point here, is if you're DIYing it and you're not truly DIYing it, you're taking advice from things you find on the internet and articles that are written. They didn't write those for you. They wrote those for a big audience. And what they're saying by that big quote that you made, the precise weighting of stocks and bonds in your portfolio should be derived based on your age and blah, 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 that's cookie-cutter advice. And do you want cookie-cutter advice that's not unique to you? And I think the answer has to be no.
Well, and I love what Morningstar says about this. Morningstar is a kind of a research firm that looks at mutual funds and various other investments. And they said they had a study that took 5 separate issues related to making good financial decisions, and then they compared those issues to how DIY investors typically react to the issue as opposed to those following the suggestions of a financial advisor. Now, this study actually evaluated allocating clients' total assets, income planning and account decisions, retirement planning product options, leveraging tax advantages through allocation and withdrawal strategies, and considering expected retirement expenses. Now, if your hair's not like standing up on the back of your neck right now going, man, that's overwhelming, then okay, let's understand the results. The study concluded that the methods recommended by advisors could boost clients' retirement by 22.6% over the methods that were taken up by DIY investors typically. 22.6%. I think that's a legitimate impact on someone's retirement that an advisor can have. That's not typically what a DIY investor would do.
Yeah, and that impact can be so great, and it's not all focused on rate of return either, not just the accumulation side of that.
Right.
There's the taxes, there's the income, how you take distributions from your assets in retirement. And I think that's where people do recognize their need. I think when they move from the accumulation phase to the distribution phase in retirement, there's not a lot out there that Google's going to provide much help on that outside of some arbitrary 4% rule, right? Or less than that. And making that all work, those are the values an advisor brings or should bring to the table that is above and beyond the investment advice. And I think it's important to point out, too, we talked about these articles that are out there. They are written based on advice from guess who? Advisors.
Yes.
Right? So they're actually consulting with a financial advisor to write most of these articles. So they are even not really giving you DIY. They're borrowing from other people's advice.
Well, Scott, a lot of times these articles are replete with rules of thumb. And we call them here at Gen Wealth rules of dumb because they typically don't really apply to specific situations. And rules of thumb are things like the 4% rule. Oh, yeah, you can just have a portfolio and take 4% out and it'll be fine. It is until it isn't, because the 4% rule doesn't really take into account the risk of the market going down while you're pulling money out of that portfolio. That is called sequence risk, and it doesn't take that into account. And you can deplete your portfolio as a result of sequence risk if you're not careful. So these articles are really kind of based, as I said, on rules of thumb. And when I have these conversations with people who subscribe to these rules of thumb, they say, well, this is how it is. This is the way it is. And I say, well, but let's talk about sequence risk, or let's talk about this specific thing. And they'll always get around to, well, okay, in that instance, yeah, you're right. And it just every time it's in that instance, yeah, you're right. And so especially in the retirement income phase, you've got to be very, very careful about what you do. And you've got to also, I think, go to an advisor who really does understand the entire spectrum of things that you're dealing with in retirement income planning.
Yeah, I think, we all need to step back and realize we don't know what we don't know. And that
I'm getting better at that as I get older.
Yeah, and it takes a little bit of little bit of maturing to be able to accept that sometimes. Right. But knowing that, hey, I don't know everything, that I do need help, that hey, it might cost me a little bit, but what are the consequences for me trying to do it myself?
Yeah. Now, one of the passions we have at Gen Wealth is education, and we have a great opportunity. If you're watching on our live stream broadcast this morning, it is still available to you to watch live. It's tomorrow, right, John?
Yes, tomorrow night, 6:30, I believe it is, that we are doing this webinar on taxes. Taxes are a huge deal these days. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of heat about taxes, a lot of concern about taxes, but there's a lot of hype on the tax issue too. Right. So we're going to try to cut through the confusion and take a look at what the real facts are about taxation in retirement. There are some things that you can do, some critical things to minimize your taxes, but you need to really be thinking about that before you retire. So we're actually going to have that workshop coming up on the line, on the webinar. You can go to getreadyforthefuture.com/events and register at that location. And Scott, there will be a replay of this. So our listeners who are listening on Saturday on the radio, they will think, okay, well, I just missed it. That was Thursday. But you can actually go to our website, getreadyforthefuture.com, and be able to log in.
The perils of trying to DIY your retirement will continue after this.
At Gen Wealth, one of our standards is that we're life changers. We believe one of the best ways to change your life is to educate yourself. George Washington Carver said that education is the key that unlocks the golden door of freedom. Let that soak in for just a moment. Think about the changes that you can make by learning more, specifically learning more about your money. We are passionate about education. We believe that it has the potential to change not only one life, but generations to come.
The beauty of a potter's work is that each item is unique. No piece is the same. That's what makes it art. At Gen Wealth, we believe your financial plan should be unique to you. Through our process, your money is carefully shaped around your goals and dreams. Your future, artfully crafted. Call us today or visit our website and connect with us. Gen Wealth Financial Advisors.
From the Gen Wealth Radio Network studios, we're back with more of the Get Ready for the Future show.
On Facebook, on YouTube, and on the radio, this is the Get Ready for the Future show. I'm Scott Inman. Welcome back, along with me, John Shrewsbury and Chad Roller today out from our Conway office as we talk about the perils of trying to DIY your retirement. We talked about our home building experience, and one of the things we didn't bring up in the first segment is when people ask me about how my experience went, and I did say it was largely pleasurable, but I do tell them that it basically was my life for about 6 to 8 months. That's all I thought about when I got up. That's all I thought about when I went to bed. Sometimes in between I wasn't sleeping much because of the decision-making that had to go on. It takes all of your time and energy to try to, in my case, contract a house. But even if you're not contracting it, John, I'm sure that you were thinking about it day and night as well.
Yeah.
And, when you think about trying to DIY your retirement, I think that's the first question that you really ought to ask yourself is maybe you have done it. Maybe you've DIY'd your investing. Maybe you've been really diligent about contributing to your retirement accounts, and maybe you're ready. Maybe you've done a great job. But now as you step away from work, if you're considering doing that 5 to 10 years from now or tomorrow, do you really want to spend all that time and energy wrestling with, are you making the right decisions?
Yeah, I can tell you that I did. I was kind of consumed by the thoughts of my house being constructed. I went to bed and was thinking about it and got up and was thinking about it, as you said. But when I went to bed, I could actually lay my head on my pillow and go, you know what? My contractor's got it. He's doing a great job. I go by and check on him every once in a while. Things are going really well, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. And so I didn't spend a lot of sleepless nights thinking about, man, I've got to get this guy out here and get him to doing this and all that. That just wasn't the issue because I had a great contractor building my house for me. And I can only imagine, Chad, that if you don't have that, then it is all consuming.
Well, I mean, ultimately, you know what the end result you want it to look like, right? And so, that it's their job to get you to that end result. And I think that's what, as advisors, clients come in and they say, okay, I know what my retirement wants to look like, but I don't know exactly how to make that happen.
Right.
And, one of the things going through the home building process is picking out everything.
Yeah.
That is half the battle is in my case was
colors, cabinets.
Let's narrow it down to 3 choices.
Yes.
And A, B, or C, but unfortunately there's a whole lot more than the alphabet out there when you start looking at, flooring and all there's so many options out there. And that's the same way in the investment world. There's a lot of options.
Since he just built a house, I think there's a story there that we should probe a little bit further. I can tell by the expression on his face that was a bit of a traumatic experience.
Well, let's just say there's a lot of emotions, and some of this gray hair right here is not from just the 3 kids. So.
That was well played.
There you go.
You never know when Lacey may be listening, so you got to take it easy there. But hey, you bring up the emotions. And that's where we're going next here, because that's really where you can make mistakes. I think about even in my own personal finance, I've really had to work hard at training my mind to not make a decision based on what I want right now, but make a decision based on what's the best financial decision I can make. And I think, there's some balance there. You do want to have fun in retirement. You don't want to constantly be making decisions just because it makes financial sense. But if you don't consider it at all and you let your emotions take over, that can be a huge peril to trying to DIY your retirement.
Let's think about the last time we had a big downturn in the market. It was just a year ago, just a little over a year ago, we had this big swing in the market. And I want everybody to think back about how you had that pit in your stomach when you were looking at your portfolio and it was down 20, 25, 30% from where it was at the beginning of the year or maybe even into February. And emotions just swell up when that happens. You just have just this big tidal wave of emotion and going, I need to do something. And sometimes the best thing you can do is to do nothing. Obviously, that was the case because we've seen that market actually come back and just rally incredible amounts since that time. Now, obviously hindsight says, well, that was a great decision to stay put. But when you were in that moment, did you really want to stay put or did you really want to go to cash? And did you really want to put it in something totally 100% safe? We had that kind of conversation, Chad, many times with clients who, were caught up in the obvious, questioning of what was going on with the pandemic and the effect it was having on the market and how long this was going to actually last. And we knew that the wrong thing to do was to move out after the horse was out of the barn, so to speak.
Right, because if you're investing by the plan tells you how to invest, right?
Right. And
that's same with the home building process. I remember going back, some of the decisions that got very emotional was the ones that we had to, make on a short notice. Like, hey,
deadlines.
We forgot to, that the backsplash guy's coming. We got to make this backsplash happen because you got to order it, you got to have it there, and you want to keep things flowing, right? Because if you hold that up, then you're holding something else up.
Right.
So those emotions that you have to make without the have preparedness and the planning, those are a lot different than when you have everything lined out and I made that decision months ago. If this was to happen or something's out of stock or something like that, then we just go to option B.
Yeah.
And if you think about, what's going on right now, Scott, we're having to manage emotions in a completely different way.
Yeah.
I just had a conversation yesterday about, cryptocurrency with somebody that I was like, okay, well, we don't do that. And that's not our role to gamble money that you have for retirement. And it was just like, yeah, but look at what it's doing. And
right.
So you have to be sure to manage emotions on both sides because it is in a hot market that people, throw a lot of money at something that is what I call a shiny object. It is one of those things that oh man, I'm so intrigued by that. I can't take my eyes off of it because it's doing so good and I need to put some of my money in that. And that happens generally at the wrong time for the wrong reason.
Yeah. And another one right now, John, is the CD rates. We're having that conversation on a regular basis now because CD rates have held so long, low for so long, and a lot of those are coming up for renewal right now, and they're going back to renew, and they're not liking what they're seeing.
Right.
So that conversation's going on. So, that quote safe money or that money that we're trying to hold on, preserve capital. That is a conversation right now that sometimes taking on risk. The reward right there is it's tough right now.
Yeah, these low interest rates causes people sometimes to think about doing things with their money that they normally wouldn't do. And, it's just that desire to get something out of it. And especially when it comes to an emergency fund, folks, the thing that you've got to understand about an emergency fund, it is there for emergencies. It's like an insurance policy. It is not an investment. It's not supposed to be earning big bucks or anything of that nature. It's supposed to be there as that warm safety blanket that you can go to when you have a problem and you don't want to put risk into that equation.
Think about that comparison that we just made there. 12 months ago, people were in fear and panic selling, and the world was potentially ending in their minds. And now they're seeing the market up, and in some cases, some investments up 60, 80, 90% in the last 12 months, and they think it's time to really get on board with cryptocurrency, right?
Yeah.
So think about the dichotomy there. That's emotionally driven, and really the even keel is the answer, right? You should be the same from the planning perspective, regardless of if the market's going down 20 or going up 80.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that emotion is a big deal. Another emotion that you have to deal with in planning for retirement is doubt. You know, you think, okay, I don't know enough. I'm not worth more than, what I have right now. I don't really think I've got enough money to go see a financial advisor. It's too late for me. Mm-hmm. We've heard a myriad of those types of things that really involve doubt. And here is the real bottom line to that. You are where you are, and you know what you know as of this moment. That doesn't have to dictate your future. You can actually get help, get assistance, and make the best out of what you have. And Scott, I think there have been many times that we've seen people come into Gen Wealth with all this doubt and all this concern and everything, and when they leave, the difference is they have a written plan and they now have direction and they feel really good about that.
Yeah, that's a huge point. So obviously, first of all, when you said you don't have enough money to work with an advisor, we'll point out, as we do oftentimes on our broadcast, that we do not have account minimums. We believe everyone should have access to a financial advisor and a written financial plan. We will work with you regardless of what the asset level is. But I think it does highlight the importance of, if you think you're in a good position or a bad position, you don't really know until you get that plan. And as John mentioned, if you have that doubt, come see us and get that plan built, because it's important to know. And if you're 5 or 10 years away from retirement, you've still got time to do something about it. Maybe it's not going to be as good as you'd hoped it would have been 20 years ago, but you still have time to do something about it, because we can look at things like how much you're saving, where your investments are, and what kind of risk you're taking on. Can you get to the finish line? And then it becomes all about, at the finish line, income, monthly income moving forward, a retirement income plan built for you. That's what we do every day. You can take advantage of that by calling 501-653-7355 or send us an email at info@getreadyforthefuture.com and begin walking through the Gen Wealth Ready to Retire process.
Scott, one other thought about this is, we've talked about, people looking up stuff online. Let's just talk about media-driven financial planning versus advisor-driven financial planning. You got to understand, number one, especially in the broadcast media, they make money based on you continuing to watch, and you continuing to watch is oftentimes based on how much fear they can stoke in you, or concern they can stoke in you about what's going on in the markets or whatever the case may be. If you stay frozen in fear rather than investing in your future, you are really going to accept more risk than you really think, because there is a risk of allowing fear to take over. And so, and the other thing that I would say is, echoing what Scott said earlier, is that anything you see that is in the media is really very general information. It is very broad-based. It is not specific to you. They don't know you. They don't know your situation. They don't know your dreams, your goals, your desires. They don't know that you want to take that trip to Hawaii when you go and retire. They don't really know anything about you. They are really just giving you very broad-based, wide-angle information. What you get with an advisor is very specific information. It's almost like the difference in a wide-angle lens and really a magnifying glass that's using the sun to focus that energy on one particular spot that you need to be attending to in your retirement.
That is so huge. The people who on Fast Money's
Yes.
Their intention there is to get you to watch.
Yep.
Their intention is not to have a successful retirement for you. Their intention is to get you to watch. The perils of DIYing your retirement. We'll talk more as the Get Ready for the Future show rolls on.
What do you know about saving money?
So you'll have more stuff that you can get.
So, would you rather spend money or save money? You'd rather save money?
Yeah, I would do $1 and $1 after 2 days.
Do you know what a credit card is?
Yes.
What's a credit card?
So something that has money on it. And if you cash it in, you can pay with it.
But how does the money get on the credit card?
Bill Gates.
What about a car? How much money do you think it takes to buy a car?
100.
So for $100, what would your car look like?
A pink car that has glitter all over it.
So if I gave you what would you buy with it?
Maybe a car. 2, 3 houses. 100 wood. 2,000 toys. And infinity couches.
What do you think a 401k is?
A candy bar. Okay, a wafer with chocolate syrup on top and then caramel on top and then chocolate chips.
Would you cover it in chocolate?
Yeah.
Tell me everything you know about money.
That it costs a lot and that people get only a few things. And if you save money, you can get stuff that you need.
Want more straight talk about retirement, investments, and your money? Listen to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Now back to the Get Ready for the Future show.
The perils of trying to DIY your retirement. That's the subject of today's Get Ready for the Future show. We talked a lot in the last segment about how emotions can drive you to make the wrong decisions at the wrong time for the wrong reason. And sometimes doubt is one of those emotions that you just don't feel like you're ready and it's too late for you. How do you know? And is it time to make a change? Feeling secure about your future starts with how you see your future. We've got 10 ways to shift your perspective about planning in our free download. What's the plan? A manifesto for your life, your worth, and what happens next. And you can get your copy. It's a free copy at getreadyforthefuture.com/plan, or you can text the word plan to this number, 501-381-5228. Again, that's 501-381-5228, or go to getreadyforthefuture.com/plan to get that What's the Plan manifesto.
Scott, you ever watch any of the home improvement shows on the various channels?
You know, I have caught parts of them over the years, but I've never been drawn to it. Let's put it that way.
My wife loves them, and they're on all the time around the house, and I'll walk through, and there'll be some things. But there's one series called Flip or Flop, and it's about, obviously, flipping houses, and sometimes the flip flops.
Right.
It just doesn't work. I've been in a few of those houses that they tried to flip it, and it just kind of flopped because, they kind of just would, I don't know, put some sheetrock over, rotten wood or whatever the case may be.
Put lipstick on the pig.
Don't they buy it unseen? I mean, don't they don't know, because they're getting it at an auction or something,
yeah,
right? They don't know what they're walking into.
I think that's right. But, when you don't really understand the state that the house is in or the quality of the renovations or anything like that, sometimes the flip isn't enough and the property is, as I said, just a flop. There are some mindsets and strategies that I think are flops when it comes to retirement planning, and we want to walk through a few of those. Investments alone, that's a flop. For whatever reason, and I guess it's probably because that's where, the focus is for a lot of people. They think retirement is all about investments. And we feel so strongly about this issue that Janet and I wrote a book called Your Retirement Should Be More Than Just Investments. It really should be a lot of other things. And Scott, when you think about the long list of issues that we deal with when we are planning someone's retirement that have really very little to do with investments, it would surprise you to look at all of the issues that are involved in financial planning that really don't speak directly to the investment accounts.
Yeah, I think the mindset is very commonly, if I get $1 million or if I get $1.5 million or whatever number you've laid out there for whatever reason, by age, whatever, that's enough. And that's really what John's talking about, the investments alone mentality. We get that common question in a client, our first appointment with a client, oftentimes is, do I have enough to retire? Or how much do I need to retire? Before we've talked about anything else. And if there's anything that you catch from this show, if you don't remember anything else, it's not about your asset level, it's about your income. And your income comes to you more than likely on a monthly basis because that's how you pay your bills. And it starts with planning to receive that income for the rest of your life, John.
Yeah, and it's not only that investments alone, but it's that specific investment.
Right.
You know, how many times do you look under the hood at that specific investment that you're going all in on?
Right.
Just like if we were to go out right now and say, hey, this afternoon we're going to go buy us a house to flip and flop, right? You know, how many things underneath that roof would we need to be looking at?
Right.
You know, from the foundation to the heat and air. I mean, there's a lot of things that could come up to, you know, basically cost you in the long run or even in the short run to be able to make some profits out of that investment.
I have to divert for just a second and tell a personal story. Abby and I, my daughter, have been looking at houses. Now, we're really just looking because this market is way too hot to be buying a house in right now. But I'm actually trying to teach her some things about, real estate and buying houses and things of that nature. And typically, this is how a visit to a house goes. She'll walk in and she goes, oh, wow, it's super cute, and I love this, and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm looking at it and going, that wall is not straight, right. and the floor kind of just get. And you know what's happened over time is that she's begun to walk in and go, that floor kind of gives a little bit right here, and I don't know about this wall over here. She's learning about how to do this, and there is a lot that goes into buying a house, just like there's a lot that goes into putting together a retirement income plan for yourself, and it's not all about how cute the house is, right. And it's not all about how well the performance of the investments are. There's a lot more to it than just that.
I thought about when Chad was talking about that, the sight unseen buying a house, it can be too good to be true, right? Because you got the deal. Well, sometimes the investments are sold to you that way, right? It's the deal, or it's the bells and whistles, or it's the what this thing's going to do. And that's not a plan either, to Chad's point there. So let's talk a little bit about withdrawal, because that is really where Gen Wealth has developed really our wheelhouse as far as developing retirement income plans. And a large reason, John, I think you did it was because you saw the environment change. Over the last 25 years ago, the 4% rule, as it is known today, that if you have an allocated portfolio of 60% equities, 40% fixed income, that was the magic asset allocation, and the magic withdrawal number was 4%. Bond yields were much higher then, and certainly it might have worked at one time, but there's still the perception out there of that's how you take money out of your investments, and it does not work anymore.
Well, and we've seen this huge push particularly in the 401k areas of what are called life cycle funds or lifestyle funds. And essentially what those are funds that are adjusted. Their asset allocation is slightly adjusted as you get older. And you move from, let's say, the 2025 fund to the 2021 fund, or whatever the case may be. You're basically reallocating those investments, but what you have is a variation of that 60-40 portfolio. Well, let's look where we are right now. The equity markets are really hot. The bond market is really not. When you think about 40% of your portfolio being in bonds right now, it's really one of those things that you go, okay, is that the right place for me to be at this particular point in time? Well, there's no mitigation to that in those life cycle portfolios. They don't go, well, hey, the market is performing like this, so we probably ought to do this. They just don't do that. And so you can be in a situation where you have a rising interest rate environment that is negative toward the bond market, and 40 or 50% of your portfolio is sitting in bonds. And Chad, that's just not necessarily a winning equation, even in your retirement cycle.
Well, even savings alone is a flop. Being in something that's so conservative that, hey, I'm not going to lose anything, or even if I'm going to put on a little bit of risk inside a bond portfolio, is not necessarily where you may want to be right now. And so even savings alone, just saying, hey, if I don't lose any money, then I'm going to be okay.
Yeah. And a lot of people are still of that mindset. If I don't lose money, everything will be good. And I agree that not losing money is a great thing.
Right.
If you can not lose money in a down market, wonderful. But going into a hidey hole where you don't have the opportunity to gain, then that is a real problem.
And that's our next flop, savings alone, being perception of safe with your money. How many times have you heard this? Hey, I've got $1 million. If I just put it all in something safe and take $40,000 out a year, it's going to last me 25 years. That's my retirement plan. But that's not a good one either, because you're going to need, if you need $40,000 a year now, you're going to need more than that really in year 2 of retirement, and more than that in year 5 and 10. Inflation is the culprit here that still puts you at a tremendous risk if you are in a safe environment with your money.
Yeah, and you can't go down that road. Scott, another issue that I think that a lot of people really kind of fall back on, and Social Security is one of these things that crops up in this issue. I've got Social Security coming in. I'll do fine. I've got my Social Security check coming in. Social Security alone is a flop because there is not enough money coming in to support your lifestyle in most cases from Social Security alone. That's why saving and investment during your lifetime is so important, that you are able to have a pool of resources that you can rely on in addition to Social Security. I'm not dogging Social Security by any stretch of the imagination. It is very foundational to your retirement. But what it is not is the savior of your retirement. You've got to have additional resources coming to bear. And I think Social Security really plays that role with some people, because all of this is so overwhelming. It's almost like they're looking for that hero to come rescue them, and everything's going to work out okay. Mm-hmm. And if you're counting on the government to do that, that's probably not going to happen, because we can't pay for what we got already.
Yeah.
And so Social Security alone is a flop.
And how many people have that as their plan, Social Security alone, even when they have investments?
Yes.
It's the investments are over here, break in case of emergency, I'm going to make do on Social Security. Is that the dynamic retirement that you really want?
It's a just-in-case retirement, as we talk about. Yeah. Just in case I need something, I can reach over here and get it, but I'm going to pinch every penny that I can. I'm going to squeeze every nickel that I can, Chad, and try to live my life just on my Social Security check.
Yeah, and that's, the average right now, according to the AARP, is about $1,543 a month. Here in 2021.
And it's not going to keep up with inflation.
No.
You're not going to get cost of living raises that keep up with inflation. All right, so real quickly, we've got about a minute and a half left. So what is the flip? We've given you lots of flops in our flop discussion. Our flip is your perspective of financial planning. You see what we did there on the play on words? You need to flip that. If your perspective of financial planning is any of these flops that we've given you, let's change that. And we've got some pretty strong opinions about planning. So strong, in fact, we believe it deserves its own manifesto. We talked about that at the first of this segment. We're going to give you another opportunity here. What's the Plan has 10 ways to shift or flip your perspective of financial planning. It's a manifesto for your life, your worth, and what happens next. And you can get a free copy. Visit getreadyforthefuture.com/plan or text the word plan to 501-381-5228.
Speaking of perspective changes, I want everybody to have a little bit of perspective on a big announcement that we've got coming up next week here on the Get Ready for the Future show. Can't tell you what it is, but it's big doings.
You're just choosing not to.
I choose not to. I've been told that I don't need to say it today.
Right.
I will say it next week, but I want everybody to be listening next week and be viewing on the live stream next week, because we've got big announcements coming up from Gen Wealth Financial Advisors on a big step that we're making in terms of our program and what we're offering to the public. So be sure to tune in for that.
The perils of trying to DIY your retirement will continue after this.
There's always been power in standing up for what you believe in, challenging the status quo, and never accepting the ordinary. What about the rest of your life? Will you settle? Or will your retirement be more? More fun, more family than finances, more than just investments. Connect with us at Gen Wealth and harness the power of more.
One of the first things that you see when you walk into a Gen Wealth office is the Gen Wealth Standard. There are 7 characteristics of our company and really reflect the personality of who we are. One of my favorites is the Gen Wealth Standard that says that we are trailblazers. We do not quit no matter the obstacle. We're always trying to innovate for our clients, trying to solve problems, and it's a standard that we uphold every day.
Education-driven, strategy-based, team-delivered. That's how we roll on the Get Ready for the Future show, and we're back for more.
The perils of trying to DIY your retirement. That's the subject of today's Get Ready for the Future show, and we're ready to bring it home in our final segment here. John talked about Flip or Flop, one of those home improvement shows. I've watched a little bit of that, not a lot of it, but I will tell you one, and this is a little more old school. I don't even think it's on anymore, but it's one that I did watch quite a bit of maybe 15 years ago, I guess. It was, I think, on ABC, and I think Ty Pennington was the guy, right?
Yep.
Remember Extreme Home Makeover?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Where they came in and they basically took somebody's house that they had a lot of problems with, and they sent them away on vacation to Disney World or something, and for a week or two or however long it took, or however long they dedicated to it, they made a huge change. They made over their home, and it didn't even look like the same home when those people came back from their vacation.
I actually had the opportunity to volunteer at an extreme home makeover in Saline County.
Is that right?
Yeah, I sure did. It was a lot of fun. It was a really kind of an emotional experience because this family, the child had some health problems, and first one thing then the other, and they really needed this home made over so it would not impact in a negative way his health. Yeah. And so it was a great opportunity, great to see all that happening all at once. It's a big orchestration.
Am I right on the time frame then? Was that about 15 years ago?
Yeah,
so I can't remember if time gets away from
yeah.
it. I'm pretty sure the show's not on anymore. But when you think about applying that to your retirement, you know, we talked about DIYing your retirement. Maybe you've done that up until this point. And maybe you're in a good place. Maybe you're in a bad place. Maybe you don't even know what place you're in, but you're in that house and you know that it needs some work. You know that it needs a new room. You know that it needs a new coat of paint. Whatever you think you need, the makeover happens with complete financial planning, not listening to the financial gurus, not reading articles, not trying to DIY it, but coming in and getting a written financial plan. And when I think about that, you know, we talked about at the open of the show, guys, about our home building experiences. We started with the construction. It really starts before that. It starts with the meeting with your architect.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I when you say extreme, having built 3 houses and going through the process and getting, I think about, you know, having built 3 houses and now being a financial advisor and helping people walk through the retirement process, I think about this guy that goes down to Home Depot buys all these materials, has them delivered to some land, and then just starts looking like, hey, I'm about to start putting this house together with just these materials without having a actual blueprint. And so I know that sounds very extreme and nobody would ever do that, but in a lot of ways, we have clients come in our office that have basically done that. They've gathered the materials, they've gathered the assets, and not once have they ever stopped to put together, well, I may need to know what I'm going to do with these, and how to put this together. So, yes, that is a little bit of an extreme analogy about going, just dumping a bunch of materials on a piece of land and saying, hey, I'm going to build a house without a set of blueprints. But absolutely, I know by going through it 3 times, that set of blueprints, even though we had to make some scribbles on it from time to time, we had something pretty set in stone as actually what we're going to do.
And to Chad's point, Scott, just because you have the money doesn't mean you have the plan. I've had people walk in and go, okay, here's my plan, and it was their statement on their 401k. Well, that's not a plan. That's just an accounting of where your money is.
Right.
How are you going to use that money? What are the things that you're going to do with that money? How are you going to actually allow that money to affect your life? That's where the planning comes in. We're going to look at needs, we're going to look at wants, and we're going to look at dreams that you've got and wishes that you've got that you can actually put on paper and say, okay, mathematically, this is how this is going to happen. That is the planning part of it, and that's where the difference maker comes in with the Gen Wealth Ready to Retire process.
Yeah, and one of the things like building a house, some people may say, oh, I don't want 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. Well, why? And a lot of our conversation is asking the question of why. Why do you think you need this, or why do you need this?
The purpose.
Yeah, well, that's just kind of what everybody else did.
Right.
Yeah, but that's not really what you may need. You may need, 4 bathrooms instead of and 4 bedrooms if you're really going to meet your needs, or you may need to downsize and maybe make the living room bigger or something like that. So a lot of that process that we start out with is just answering that question of why. Why do you think you need to do this?
And guys, when you think about the Gen Wealth Ready to Retire process, it really covers about 7 key areas in your life. Yes, investment strategy is one of those areas. We do pay attention to investments, even though we talk about planning all the time and downplay the importance of the investments. Investments are important. They're just not everything to your plan. But investment strategy is key to the Gen Wealth Ready to Retire process. Another key is Social Security maximization. Now, that does not necessarily mean waiting to 70 to draw the maximum Social Security check. And this may be a little bit of a hard concept for some people to grasp, Scott, but leveraging the ability to pull Social Security income so that the rest of your money has the opportunity to last your entire life is what we're talking about in maximizing, I guess you would say, the utilization of Social Security.
Right, perfect, because it's a monthly income plan, right? So it's a consistent number that we're trying to achieve. How does Social Security play into achieving that monthly income? I think about, too, Chad, when you were talking about going down to Home Depot and getting all the materials for the home building project, I think even some folks come in here and they didn't get it all at Home Depot. It's spread over at Lowe's. It's over at the local hardware store. Right. I mean, they've got orphan 401ks sitting around. I mean, there's some value, even if you're 15 or 20 years away from retirement, John, of consolidating and getting this thing all in order.
They got layaway accounts in a lot of places, and if you're too young to know what layaway is, look it up. But it is, they've got a lot of stuff out there. And the scary thing about that is most of the time, they're not paying attention to all those things. Right. They've got orphan 401k plans that they haven't looked at the investments in that in 15 years. Mm-hmm. They've got plans that they don't really understand what the investments are, and none of that is coordinated to help them prepare for retirement. And so pulling all that together and creating that plan is a big part of the Ready to Retire process. Something else, Scott, that I think is very important when it comes to thinking about your retirement income. Do you want that retirement income to stay the same throughout your entire life, or would you like to get it increased? Inflation is going to demand, and we're going to see inflation play a bigger and bigger role in the lives of our retirees because we're at that stage in the economic cycle where inflation is showing up again.
Yeah, we've been lulled into the sense of low inflation rates. I just saw at the end of the first quarter, year over year, it was up 2.6, and that's higher than it has
Yeah,
been.
yeah.
Now we're calling for maybe in the 3 to 3.5% range this year. That's still historically below the long-term average in America. So if we get even to average inflation rates of about 4%, that means everything that you spend your money on, if you start your retirement plan with $5,000 a month, is going to go up year over year, and you need to have a plan that has an investment strategy to give you those raises. And you'll see it in the plans that we build here at GenWealth. And I think that also highlights the importance, John, of you have to believe in equities even in retirement. You can't have that safe money.
Absolutely, you do. And Scott, one other thing that I think is incredibly important that most people do not even want to begin to think about in retirement is that whole issue of your healthcare needs and what do I do to take care of healthcare needs. Most people are nursing home phobic. They don't want to talk about going to the nursing home. If you don't have a plan, then the likelihood of you going to a nursing home, because that's the default mechanism, then that you're probably going to do that. What you need is a plan to stay out of the nursing home. Chad, you worked with a lot of our clients on the issue of long-term care, and we're never trying to plan for them to go to the nursing home. We're trying to help them stay out.
Absolutely. And long-term care is just another expense in retirement, and we've got to figure out how to deal with it. You know, so you're either going to deal with it through your assets that you've, or you're going to deal through it with Medicaid. And obviously that's something that we don't want to see clients have to experience. So where are we going to go? You can meet in the middle and say, hey, you know, do I want to subsidize those expenses with long-term care insurance? And there's ways to look at go ahead and paying on those premiums now in order to be able to pay those expenses later.
And listen, we know that's a potential. It's not a guarantee that you'll need long-term care, but the statistics say 70% of us will. So the potential is likely high that you'll need some sort of care. So addressing that is very important. Well, you heard the final bell. Today's show went really fast, by the way.
It did.
It is time for our final thoughts, and we always start with the far chair from me. So we'll start with your final thought, Chad.
I think my final thought is, you know, a DIY, you know, anything you do it yourself is, when it boils down to, you're trying to save money. You know, in a lot of ways, you know, there is satisfaction in doing it yourself, but you're trying to save money. And I think, especially as the older I get, there are some things in this life that are not worth saving money on because it's going to cost you in the long run. And I think, you know, trying to save money by not, you know, utilizing an advisor or putting together a plan can definitely have some impacts on you in the long run.
Scott, my final thought is you've got to understand the mindset that you need going into retirement. Going to Home Depot and getting some lumber is not going to build your dream house. As Scott and Chad have both mentioned, you've got to have that blueprint. You've got to have that plan. You've got to have the specific tools to put all of that together. And I believe that most people really do want to work with a financial advisor and have them guide them through that process. You're still in charge, but working with an advisor makes sure you don't run off the cliff by not knowing exactly where you're going.
My final thought is an action step, as it usually is, an opportunity for you to get something beyond when this program ends, and the future for you can't be what you want without planning for it. So we've got an opportunity for you to get a copy of What's the Plan? It's our free download, and it's available now. You can get it. It's going to have 10 ways to shift your perspective of financial planning. Just go to getreadyforthefuture.com/plan. Or you can text the word plan to the following number, 501-381-5228. Again, it's 501-381-5228. Just text the word plan, get your free copy. And we thank you for watching and listening. We'll see you again next week.
The GenWealth financial team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 501-653-7355. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. GenWealth Financial Advisors is an Arkansas-registered investment advisor with securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC.